Thanks everybody for joining. If you have any questions for us, obviously type them in the comments and we can see if we can get to it. Today's topic, I'm not sure if it says that on the title, but we are going to chat through hormonal disruptors in the modern environment. This is a pretty interesting topic that doesn't really get covered that much if you read mainstream news, particularly on a diet and health standpoint. Very few people realize that, say, sperm counts in the world, or at least in the West, have gone down dramatically over the last 50 years. I think as much as 50%. Testosterone levels are decreasing substantially in the West. And this is just for men. I think, women tend to have more complex endocrine systems. And so the hormonal disruptions that Preethi can talk to on the female side can possibly be even greater, particularly with the inclusion of birth control and a lot of other products that are very commonly prescribed by medical professionals who will tell you that there are, basically limited or no consequences of taking them. So maybe Preethi, if you want to share, your experience with all of that, you probably have a little bit more color to share than me personally, but then obviously, our eyes are in probably the right content as far as, how do we take this information and apply it to our regular lives?
Yeah, sure. So from a woman's perspective, they're kind of everywhere. So they can be in like cans, like if you buy tuna fish and the BPA stuff. They can be in like perfumes, and women love wearing perfumes. They can be in like soaps and shampoos. And if you read the ingredients of these soaps and shampoos, like you'll just be like, what is this stuff? A big one for women is makeup.
Yeah.
And that's one, honestly, that I didn't realize until very recently. And I only recently switched my entire thing to be all natural organic products. But that's huge. And like laundry detergent.
Yeah, cleaning products.
Yeah, dishwasher soap. Like, I love using Windex because it like nothing works like Windex. But the stuff in Windex is basically like it's toxic.
Yeah.
So it's literally everywhere. So and like I've even heard it even in mattresses now have some of these toxins. So you can be like soaking up some of these things as you sleep if your mattress is like old or has that, I forget what it's called. There's apparently like this layer that's put on modern mattresses just to make it last longer. Yeah. And that has like endocrine disruptors. So literally everywhere.
Yeah. So like basically anything that touches your skin or enters your body can include endocrine disruptors. And, speaking as a layperson, typically the mass produced products have found some sort of commercial ingredient that enables these products to be produced more cheaply, whether it's, in the case of whatever it is that's included in the mattresses or cleaning products. And then if you think about how these products are integrated into our society, consumer packaged goods brands will try to make you scared of germs, so you buy their products. And obviously, they're not going to tell you that there's a downside to trying to keep your kitchen and house spotlessly clean all the time. And so, they're creating a quasi-hysterical, I say quasi because it's not, fully hysterical with people running around trying to clean everything. They want to create a little bit of paranoia in their customer base with respect to the need to keep everything clean. And, you see a lot of kids coming up these days with like more allergies than what their predecessors or parents may have had. And, I don't think that these things are not related. If you try to completely sterilize your environment, you just introduce susceptibilities to other things, right? That aren't the initial thing that you're trying to sterilize. And so that's important to keep in mind when, the human body is created to exist in a natural environment, eating real food, using real things that come from the earth directly. And anytime you substantially change that, there is an opportunity for longer term health risks. And these longer term health risks are the most pernicious because you can't say, oh, I cleaned my I cleaned my sink yesterday and I felt sick afterwards, right? That's the type of problem that will get immediately addressed because it's a short-term consequence, and short-term consequences are easier to litigate around and create studies around. When it comes to longer-term consequences, how are you going to differentiate between somebody who is or is not using some of these products? Because, say you're not using certain cleaning products that have these endocrine disruptors, but you're using everything else that the next person is. It's like, well, you're probably going to have a disrupted endocrine system too. And so your data in the study wouldn't really make the case that this particular product leads to this consequence that we believe is there.
Yeah, it's like, and one thing I noticed on that realm is like, it's almost like impossible to escape. Like if you live in a modern environment, you're not going to ever be 100% clean of all these chemicals. Like even if you make your house like totally chemically free, like you're going to step out and they're everywhere.
Right.
So I think there's a few things. It's like, one is like making your immediate environment clean. And to be honest, what sucks is like, it's actually quite an expensive endeavor because like it's usually the cheaper products that have all these like toxic chemicals in them.
Yep.
Whether it's makeup or cleaning products or whatever. And then as soon as you start to buy like all natural stuff, you'll notice that they're actually a little bit more expensive. And they'll come in smaller bottles because they're not made in scale. And the other thing is like, sometimes they don't clean as well.
Yeah.
For example, like I've been trying to find a replacement for Windex for months now, and I can't find one that cleans as good as Windex. I don't know what is in Windex, but it just works so well for mirrors. And I can't find a replacement.
I don't know if you've tried any of this.
Yeah, I've seen that. Is that body soap?
That they told me that was for like dishes a little bit more because I just have the bars from the same brand, the Dr. Bronner's Castile soap brand. So for folks who are unfamiliar with these terms, I use Castile soap. Ideally over 80% of the time. If I'm going to a commercial bathroom or something, I don't bring soap in my pocket to wash my hands. But when I'm at home and when I travel with Castile soap, just to avoid that, contamination to my body. And I'm okay with it only cleaning 80% as well, or something like that, as the other products. So, that's the trade-offs we make.
Yeah. That's the hard part. And then like, the other big thing that you mentioned earlier, okay, so with birth control, would you classify that as a endocrine disruptor?
Well, it immediately changes how your body's producing hormones.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's just a whole different camp. So like, I guess with birth control is like, so many women are put on this stuff when they're young, when they're teenagers. So you go to the doctor, when you're going through puberty, you have so many things that are happening in your body. You're getting pimples, you're feeling moody, you might have like weight loss or weight gain or just different things. And like the default solution to it is, instead of telling the woman that, okay, those are happening because your hormones are starting to fluctuate and there's like imbalances. And so you can use like diet and lifestyle to fix that, or you can just put them on birth control and it solves all the problems.
Right.
But it really doesn't. And that's what happened to me. So when I was 14, I was put on birth control and I was on it for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
And I had no idea. Like I thought birth control was normal because everyone I knew was taking it. And I was like, oh, like, okay, like I get my periods. And so like, I'm taking this. And the reason I went to the doctor was because I didn't get my period for like 9 months. And that's because I had lost like 35 pounds. And, as soon as I reached a certain body fat percentage, my period went away. And so I went to the doctor and they were like, well, you need to gain weight. And, I was a stubborn teenager and I was like, I don't want to get fat. Like, I don't want to gain weight. So they're like, well, the only other solution is for you to go on birth control. And so they gave it to me. And then, it brought my period back, quote unquote. And I thought, oh, like this fixed the problem. Like I'm good. And then I realized 13 years later that like the whole time, basically, these pills were tricking my body in that like, I'm already producing enough estrogen and progesterone. So it doesn't need to produce any estrogen or progesterone itself. And as a result, like my body forgot how to do that.
Yeah.
And when I got off of it, I didn't get my period back. And this happens to so many women today, where like they get off the pill and all the problems that they had before they got on all come back because they never fixed it in the first place.
Right.
Right. People go on it for so many different reasons, and then they get off of it and they're right back at square one. And then they have to go through the hard work of actually like, okay, like what am I doing? What am I eating? What are my lifestyle changes? Like, what do I need to do to actually get my hormones in balance?
Yeah.
And like, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart because it's just like, you know, I've been through it and I just see so many women going through it now. And it's this like silent epidemic almost, that very few people talk about. But like thousands and thousands and thousands of women go through it like every year.
Yeah. And if you think about why thousands and thousands of women might not realize that so many people have a similar experience, is because think about the economics behind research, right? If I am a scientist who, you know, depends on external sources to fund my studies, and I am going to study the risks of birth control, I better be prepared for a coordinated attack by people, you know, online mobs, essentially, because birth control is seen by, you know, a certain segment of society as a key to women's emancipation. And so, and to think about that, if we just put ourselves in like 1950 or 1850, you know, when more conventional, traditional family structures were celebrated and encouraged, you know, the woman's responsibility at that point would be to create kids and raise them well, so that some people existed to take care of them when they were old and arthritic and could no longer like work on the farm. Mm-hmm. And so a big key in the, you know, quote unquote, women's liberation movement is, you know, to use whatever means necessary to escape that traditional role. And so if somebody is simply, you know, intellectually curious as to, is this thing fully safe? Is it mostly safe? Is it kind of safe? Is it safe under certain circumstances? You know, a certain segment of hyper vigilant, you know, feminists will come after you.
Yep.
And so, you know, think about who most scientists are, probably kind of pussies. And like, you don't get into academia typically because you're like a rebel and want to, you know, fight large consensus to you know, learn things. I mean, maybe that used to be the case 50 or 60 years ago, but now they're mostly like obedient drones to some extent. And so 9 out of 10 of the people who might be wondering these things just simply won't go there because of concerns about career implications.
Yeah, that and honestly, like even like when I'm still navigating this area and like I'm still trying to get to the truth of like what causes this and all that. And like the hard part about it is like there's so much conflicting information. So for example, when I got off birth control and I didn't get my period back and stuff, I was running from doctor to doctor to doctor, like in the Western medicine world. And literally every doctor told me a different thing. Mm-hmm. Like one doctor was like, you have PCOS. And like, I have 0 signs of PCOS. Like usually PCOS.
And what is PCOS?
Polycystic ovary syndrome.
Oh, interesting. You know what? My ex has that. I think.
Look. Literally every doctor that does PCOS has become basically this like blanket diagnosis where like if something's wrong with you, they're like, oh, you got PCOS. But in reality, not everyone has PCOS. A lot of these women have hormonal imbalances. Yeah. And PCOS is like one of the most common. Mm-hmm. And usually signs of PCOS are like, you know, you're gaining a lot of weight.
I see.
You're starting to see facial hair. Yeah, you know, you're very angry type of thing. Like you start to become like, it's just different. The symptoms are very different. And I was like, I don't have PCOS. Like I know that I don't have PCOS. And well,
couldn't you take a CAT scan or some sort of MRI and see if you have cysts growing on your ovaries?
So then even that, right? It's not an MRI that they do. They do the ultrasound.
Oh, okay.
And 3 different doctors told me 3 different things. One of them was like,
interesting.
You have PCOS. The other one's like, oh, you're totally fine. All you need is some probiotics and you're good. And the other one was like, I need to do another image. And like, even reading a lot of this, like ultrasounds, a lot of doctors are just very inconsistent with it.
Okay.
And so I, ran from endocrinologist to gynecologist to endocrinologist and just kept hearing different things. And then eventually I got kind of sick of it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go the functional medicine route, because I started to read a lot of the blog posts that they were writing. And it felt like they were thinking about this in a much more holistic way. And that's where I started to find a lot of the answers that I discovered. So like a lot of them don't believe in doing too much testing or all that. They're just focused on like changing your lifestyle and diet to get your hormones back in balance. And even the hormone tests that are out there right now, it's not very accurate. Like even, for example, apparently blood's not a very good measure of testing your hormones, especially for women, because it varies from day to day and even the time of the day.
Sure.
And then secondly, even for like saliva or urine hormonal tests, you have to take them at a very specific time in the month. And for a woman that's not ovulating, like, how do you know?
Yeah. Right.
So then like a lot of these tests are almost like useless for people who are having like, ovulation issues or any of that. So it's like, so like it's one of those things, it's one of those epidemics, I think, that people are going to start to talk more and more about publicly, because right now it's like, it's very silent. Women are talking about it, but it's not as, but women are still being prescribed birth control as like the default solution.
Well, and you say they'll talk about it publicly. I'm not so sure, because, again, if you look at the financial incentives for mainstream media companies, or even, a company like Facebook or Instagram, it's like, who do you sell ads to? Let's just think about, I don't watch TV, but, the couple times a year I do, I pay attention to the commercials. So like, let's think about what commercials you see on TV. You see commercials for movies, you see commercials for cars, you see commercials for fast food, and you see commercials for, consumer household products. Basically those four things, like insurance. I don't know if I'm missing any broad categories, but of those five, and obviously prescription medicine. So of those six, half of those revenue contributors are likely creating or profiting from hormonal disruption that exists in the modern environment. And that's not explained by the present narrative.
Yep.
So if any media company is trying to look into like, where is this boogeyman? I don't think that their food advertisers would be very happy. I don't think that their household cleaning product advertisers would be very happy. I don't think that their pharmaceutical advertisers would be very happy. Yeah, you could still buy cars, you could still see movies, and you still would need insurance, but that's like 50% of the major ad sources for these mainstream news networks. So I can sort of say that I don't think they're going to cover it, because if you look at on the male side, a 50% decline, 50, across a statistically significant number of individuals over a 50-year period is like far more alarming than COVID, right? 50%, like a 50% reduction. And I'm not sure that reduction is stopping in the ability for men to, procreate. And it's not linear 1-to-1. I'm not saying 50% of men are sterile, but what I'm saying is like the sperm counts are down by 50%. That in and of itself is an event that would deserve like years and years of coverage, and it hasn't come yet. And I don't know what would cause it to come if nothing's caused it to come yet. Interesting.
So you don't think it could be talking about publicly? Yeah, I think it depends on the incentives. And I think there's a few things here. One is, so there's a lot of good information out there. Why does that information not become popular? It's because it's being suppressed by some of these other bigger media organizations that dominate Google search, right?
And it also needs to be simple enough for the viewing audience to understand, right? So a lot of everybody's perception of reality is wrong, including Preethi's and mine, right? All we have are approximations of what's going on around us. And when you think about how most people approximate the world around them, It's through, low resolution modifications of things that have been explained to them at a young age. So, if we think about diet and exercise, I strongly believe that fat loss is hormonally driven, but nobody's talking about fat loss being hormonally driven as much as they are talking about, well, calories in, calories out. It's like, okay, calories in, calories out is easier to wrap your head around. It fits into more basic mental models of how the world and how the human body works. Therefore, that as an idea has more transmission mechanisms to spread across society. So when you're trying to create content, you're trying to rank high in Google search, you're trying to tap into what mainstream people are interested in, you need to fit what you're saying in you could call them like neurological rivers, societal neurological rivers that have already been carved out throughout our society. And if your idea doesn't easily fit within those pre-existing neurological societal rivers, it's just going to be hard to shift the narrative and allow people with the prerequisite mental models to even understand that this thing is a thing that's important.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to get to the metabolism after I answer this question by Dirk Blaze. So he says, my sister is currently suffering from PCOS and minor cysts. She's been prescribed a med with constant daily exercise. Is this good enough to cure? Because I'm a bit worried about her well-being. Yeah, so I think I'm not sure what type of doctor diagnosed her with PCOS. If it's a general gynecologist, I would highly recommend getting a second opinion because like I said, they diagnosed me with PCOS and had 0 symptoms of PCOS. And so one, I would say make sure she gets a second opinion to make sure she does have PCOS. And there's a lot of functional doctors out there that are doing a much better job of diagnosing this. So I can DM me if you have questions. I can recommend a functional doctor that I saw that's amazing. And she specializes in PCOS and she knows what PCOS looks like. So, first of all, make sure that it's the right diagnosis. And then second of all, oftentimes what they'll do with PCOS is they'll put patients on like metformin, which is like the diabetic drug basically. And the thinking behind that is that it allows them to lose a little bit of body fat and then their metabolism goes up. And so their inflammation goes down. And, when inflammation goes down, a lot of diseases get cured, right? So it's kind of just like this pill that you take. It doesn't solve PCOS. It may be in 1% of the population it solves it, but most of the time it doesn't solve it. And really what really solves PCOS is a lot of lifestyle changes and diet changes. And there's a book I read that is phenomenal. And she is a female doctor. And she wrote this basically a code for how to navigate PCOS and what foods you need to eat on what weeks of the cycle and what things you need to do at different parts of your cycle to kind of regulate your hormones. So I would say putting someone on meds, and exercise is always going to be good, but putting someone on meds is not usually the solution. So I would recommend going to a functional doctor and getting a better protocol for what to do for PCOS. And a lot of women actually think I have PCOS, I'm going to have PCOS forever. That's not true also. PCOS is totally curable. It can go away if you make diet and lifestyle changes, and you just need the right provider to give you the advice to follow. Yeah. And going back to what you're saying with the metabolism thing, yeah, this is why a lot of gynecologists literally just go to metformin as a solution for some of these hormonal imbalances, which I think is funny.
So if, people in the listening audience are interested in, I would say a few key things that they can do to avoid the downsides of our modern environment, what would you think, because we're throwing a lot of information at people. And so we can assume that, of every 10 things we say, 2 will be taken away, unless people watch this on replay. And I would encourage you to do that. And so, what would you say, Preethi, would be key takeaways for, if I'm to make 2 lifestyle changes from this conversation, which would they be?
For women or anyone?
You can speak for women, and maybe I'll speak for men.
Okay.
Yeah.
For women, it's number 1 is diet. that is 80% of it. Every single person that's been able to overcome their hormonal imbalances did so by fixing their diet. That means removing all the processed food from your diet, because all of that is going to contribute to hormone imbalances. Eating the right foods at the right time of the month. And so women need different types of food at different types of the month, depending on what phase of the cycle they're in. And so if you're just literally eating the same thing every day and you're not using your intuition to tell you what to eat, because women are naturally very intuitive because their hormones are changing throughout the month, and like we can feel things a lot better. Mm-hmm. So we have to use the fact that our hormones change throughout the month, use that intuition to decide what to eat. So diet is the biggest thing. And there's a lot of resources out there now, luckily, for how to fix your diet and how to sync it with your cycle. And so I'd highly recommend going down the rabbit hole on Google and figuring this out. And second, I would say is probably get moving. Like, I think like women don't realize how some of these like things can actually affect their cycle. They think like, they're broken like forever and like they can't fix these, but like just like diet and movement can fix like 80% of these things. And this is the same thing for most problems. So I don't have anything new to say there.
And I know we've talked earlier about animal fat and fat in general, but maybe the folks who are listening in right now haven't necessarily heard that. So, what's your experience with, including or excluding dietary fat as it relates to hormone health?
Oh, huge. I think we talked about this in a previous video. I used to be low fat, everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And especially for women, that's not good. Women need a certain body fat percentage and fat in their diet, like good fat in their diet, to have optimal hormones. I would say men probably also do too. I don't think men would do that well on like incredibly low fat diet. It's just like not good for hormones. And so like olive oil is amazing, avocado oil, butter, like adding these generously to my food has it stabilizes my mood a lot, because like fat is satiating and you're not like, when you're hungry, you're kind of hangry.
Yeah.
And it, my digestion is better. And if your gut health is off, everything is off. So there's a whole host of reasons to have fat. So I would say definitely a huge thing. By the way, there's a question that came in for you if you want to answer it. What are the male hormonal imbalances coming from? The seed oils and carbs raising estrogen.
Okay, so I would guess it's a few fold. And to kind of answer that, but then also answer the, what do you do about it question. People are getting fatter. Both men and women are continuing to get fatter. And as Preethi touched on earlier, simply being fat multiplies your risk of anything else happening bad. I mean, most things. And so if you're, and a lot of these disruptors, I do believe, get stored in fat cells. So the more and larger fat cells that you have, the more your body is going to hold on to these toxins. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean be 0% body fat either, because there are hormonal implications to being 0% body fat. Maybe a little bit more for women, but it's also not good for men either to have too low body fat. That's not a problem for 99.5% of people. But, if you have visible abs, you probably don't need to lose more body fat to ensure that at least your body fat is optimized for hormonal health. Seed oils will likely raise inflammation. Carbs can raise inflammation. I think particularly if they come from GMO foods that have been sprayed with Monsanto's glyphosate, which I think most carbs in the United States have. And I can't imagine glyphosate, which is a known carcinogen, has anything positive to do with your endocrine system. And so I do think there's those things that exist. I also think, unfortunately, that since we introduced birth control to the modern environment, it's really, really hard to remove all traces of that from the water supply. So even if I'm careful about my environment, I'm using natural products, I'm not fat, I'm checking the boxes that can sensibly be checked. I'm still drinking water, and that water has likely been contaminated to some extent by birth control metabolites. And so, I don't want to go too far down the Alex Jones rabbit hole here, but, even before he said it, the Telegraph, I believe it was the Telegraph in the UK, one of their major publications, ran an article about hermaphroditic frogs that started to pop up in large quantities around certain areas. And I think it was speculated that, or more than speculated, that birth control contaminants in the water supply were likely leading to this. And so people can say, that's really interesting. These frogs are changing. Well, it's like, guess what? We're all animals. Animals all have, endocrine systems, as far as I'm aware, at least quasi-sophisticated ones. And so, if there's something that is causing known damage to frogs that's turning them hermaphroditic, what's the likelihood that there's zero transferability into humans? And I think that likelihood is not that high. I think there probably is some degree of carryover there. And so, what can you do in your environment? I think avoiding seed oils, and for most people, restricting carbs is a great idea, but more so because that's likely to limit inflammation, and it's likely to keep body fat a little bit lower. And so, if we can keep in mind that your fat cells are going to be the things that are holding on to a lot of these toxins, at the very least, what we can do is minimize the uncontrolled expansion and growth of the fat cells that you might have.
It's a very complicated answer.
Try to be more straightforward next time, I guess.
Okay. So what else? What other endocrine disruptors are there? So birth control.
Probably sleep.
Interesting. That's a good.
Well, I mean, if you're not getting enough sleep, your hormonal system will be out of whack, right? So, put someone on a 5-hour a night sleeping schedule for 2 months, check their testosterone levels or even, estrogen levels and all that. I guarantee they're not going to be as healthy as if that person's sleeping like 7 or 8 hours a day.
Yeah, because it's also an opportunity for your body to also get rid of the toxins, even if you.
Yeah. So all of the, modern lifestyle, where a lot of people, they wake up, they go to a job that they don't like, that stresses them out. So if you think about how our modern environment exists, we don't have chattel slavery anymore, but what we do have is like corporate serfdom. And because corporations cannot physically whip you, what they figured out over the last 150 plus years is how to mentally manipulate you, which effectively gives them a similar level of control over your actions. But it's actually a little bit more profitable because you can't necessarily sue them for that. And it's recognized as generally legal right now. So most people who work corporate jobs are being consciously manipulated by their employers to produce more stuff. And this is done through, performance reviews. This is done through promotion management. This is just basically done. This is the modern HR system is how you execute and implement modern wage slavery. And so if you think about the implications of working in a stressful environment, well, if you have high cortisol levels, that's going to rub off on everything else in your life. There's a good chance that it's going to disrupt your sleep, which is also going to have a compounding effect. Just think about things that change your mood. Like, what do you think a mood change comes from? There's a very good chance that there's some sort of underlying hormonal change that makes this mood change more likely. Okay, so then how do people cope with these challenging and stressful daily activities? Is they go home, maybe they eat some junk food. People basically go for dopamine and serotonin in order to offset stressful environments. And so just think about the unhealthy things that people do after work: eat junk food, watch Netflix, go on social media. All of these things are going to just light up different dopamine triggers in your mind. And then they're going to keep you up late. So then you end up sleeping less. And you exacerbate that, that cycle that's probably based around modern work schedules.
Yeah, that's a really good way to frame it. I almost never think about it from like they're going for dopamine, but when you think about it, that does make sense. Someone responded, maybe get to know local farmers or buy organic. Yeah, I highly recommend that. That's something I started doing about 6 months ago, where I really, really started to buy stuff from local farms. like whether it's meat or vegetables, it takes a lot more work. That's the only part, because like it's easy to go to a supermarket and just get everything you need. Buying from local farms is just a lot harder, because sometimes, you know, they only post up like every Sunday or something. And then like, you know, the farm I found for meat, like sometimes they run out of meat literally. And so it's harder, but, I feel better supporting the local ecosystem than I do like a giant food chain. And if the other option is also to use like a platform, like another place, if I can't find local meat, I found this, website called US Wellness Meats, .com. I think it's like the website is grasslandbeef.com or something. And like, it is some of the best meat I've ordered. All grass fed, all organic. So yeah, like getting to know your local farmers and buying from local farmers has made a huge difference. I can taste the difference.
And it's important to know also, like if you are switching to organic or even food purchased at farmers markets, you know, be aware that commercial incentives for your vendors will exist permanently. And a commercial incentive that will permanently exist is, how do we position our low-cost product as a high-cost product? And so if you think about that with like green labels that are labeled all natural, right? You can go to the store and if you don't think hard about it, and I've been doing this for years and it still tricks me, which means I know that 99% of people are going to fall for the same tricks, where, you know, just because a label is green, just because there's a nice picture of a clean pasture on it, and it has all of these nice buzzwords. And then you turn around and you look at the ingredients and they're terrible, right? So, you know, when you're making these, you know, lifestyle changes or shopping style changes, I would recommend investing a little bit more effort and attention your first several weeks, so you can be aware of common tricks that brands use. You know, some brands will, and I should actually write a more detailed overview of this, because, you know, all of these like consumer deception strategies can kind of coalesce around a few common strategies that I've seen play out in the supermarket, which is, you know, a brand has one line that's organic, right? And so, you know, Kroger does this with their Simple Truth brand. Mm-hmm. So Simple Truth Organic is one of the most easily accessible organic brands in the United States, due to the fact that Kroger, which is one of the largest food distributors, if not the largest in the United States, that's their in-house brand. And so some of that is organic, right? Simple mm-hmm. Truth. You just think of the name. Simple Truth means nothing, but it sounds nice, and there's a nice green label, right? So every Simple Truth product is called Simple Truth with a green label, and that will trick most people. Now, a portion of their products, like 10% of their product line, is actually organic, and they'll slap a huge organic label or word on there. And so you think most of the time that you recall seeing Simple Truth, you see Simple Truth Organic, Simple Truth Organic. That is the phrase terminology that's going to be embedded in your mind. So if you see Simple Truth non-organic, you assume that that might be a little bit better than the alternative, and it might actually be exactly the same. And so they might end up having loss leader products in the organic line that might not actually make them any profit. And then they make up those profit margins by charging you an extra 20% for their non-organic food that you think is better because it carries the same or similar label. So be mindful of that. And then,
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many marketing tricks. We should probably do that. We should probably do a live stream just on that.
We should.
It'd be a really fun topic, because like, I mean, there's so many examples. I like you said, I get tricked too. And then like, sometimes I come home, I'm like, I thought this was something else.
Right.
I have to throw it out.
Right. And, okay. So let's see, Buck Thundas, what are your preferred, ways to reduce chronic stress inputs? So, you know, diet and exercise are going to be two that Preethi and I will go to tremendously. So, you know, a consistent exercise regimen, and for stress reduction purposes, it doesn't necessarily need to align exactly with like what we do for training, because what we do for training tends to be a little bit more for body composition and like dopamine, but it also, you know, there's a stress reduction component to it. just getting blood flowing, sweating for 45, 60 minutes most days of the week does tend to help manage cortisol rises. Sleeping more, like your body, once it gets out of alignment, will more easily get out of alignment. So the more stressed out you are will lead to you sleeping less, which will lead to you being more stressed out, which will lead to you consuming more caffeine, which will exacerbate some sort of, you end up getting into a downward spiral once that initial stress has started. And so for me personally, the way I navigate, stressful activities in life is I try to nip them in the bud. And so, for people who follow me know that I consume medical cannabis to sleep, because I've noticed that, number one, I just haven't slept well since I was a teenager because of probably how active my mind is. And that's the one thing that I can take that will lead to restful sleep so I can think clearly and train hard the next day. And so anytime I feel that there's like an unmanageable cortisol rise that I'm dealing with, well, then I'll just up my cannabis dose. And, that's probably not a risk-free solution to the problem, but it is, I'm comfortable with that risk over the alternative, and the alternative being setting off a rising cortisol cascade that will, there will be some sort of reflexive response in my body where it will keep rising for a while if I don't try to nip it in the bud.
Yeah. And everyone has different ways. Like some people find, for example, meditation serves them really well for calming their active mind. Some people find jogging super helpful. I find jogging, for example, super helpful. Like, in the morning, especially, I notice that my mind just is like off to the races, and I just go for like a 10-minute jog, and like it starts to calm down. So it's because of the blood flow. I get blood flow to the brain, and then things start to slow down a little bit. Any budget-friendly suggestions? I'm assuming you mean for like organic food and GMO-free food. This is what really upsets me. Eating healthy is a little bit more expensive. But if you're looking for budget-friendly, I found that going to like local farmers markets is a lot more affordable than going to like a Whole Foods. I still go to Whole Foods a lot because it's a lot more convenient, but it's way more expensive than just going to a local farmers market on Sundays and getting fruits and vegetables there. It is cheaper there. Besides that,
Chinatown too. If you live by a Chinatown, which not everybody does, but they got good. The quality of food that they have there is typically going to be the same as what you get at your local grocery store. The grocery store just dresses it up nicer and presents it better and puts it in a nice little pyramid. So you pay more for that, but you get the same food at Chinatown.
Yeah. So I would just dig around in your local environment and see what's budget friendly. Good point about staying on the right side of the tipping point. Consistency is king. Yeah. Absolutely. What else?
Well, I thought this was great. One other thing is pay attention to your consumption of stimulants. I mentioned caffeine earlier, but I would imagine other things as well, nicotine or any sort of prescription medicine you might be on, Adderall, almost certainly. Stimulants stimulate your mind. And so if your mind is oriented towards stress production and you're consuming more stimulants, you're probably going to end up producing more stress. So, understand that the things that you're putting in your body that might be good in certain situations will amplify something that's bad in the wrong situation.
Yeah. And would you consider like social media a stimulant?
A little bit. Yeah. It keeps you up. Anything that like makes you more awake would act like that. And so, if you're getting dopamine hits from different posts on social media, at the very least, it can disrupt your sleep, which we know can set off this sort of cascade effects that we want to avoid. Yeah.
That reminds me of something I was thinking about that we could have talked about today, which is EMF stuff. And especially because I was reading actually Tim Ferriss I didn't realize that Tim Ferriss did a bunch of research around this a few years ago because he started to notice his testosterone levels dropping. And obviously that leads to all sorts of like mood issues, depression, and all that in men. And like everyone reacts to EMF differently. Some people are very EMF sensitive apparently. Other people are not. And so he used to put his phone in his jean pocket all the time and discovered that was way too close to his ball sack basically and was causing hormonal disruptions. And as soon as he did stop doing that for a month or two, he started to notice his testosterone improve. And
that's crazy.
Yeah. And so can you imagine? And a lot of people like work with their laptops on their lap.
Yeah.
And so imagine all the effects that has.
Yeah. And think about the economic incentives for the channels that you're viewing us on to tell you about these effects. It's not in their business interests to let you know that touching the thing that allows you to be a user on their platform and make them money might have health risks. So you're probably going to be the last to know if you're relying on those sources to tell you.
Yeah, for sure. There's 2 more questions that came in. How have you been able to gauge the correct for you amount of daily caffeine? I'm either all on coffee or all off.
Oh, what's up, Mike? For listening audiences, Mike dropped 30 pounds in 1 month following my dietary framework, which you can learn more on through Instagram or Twitter. And now he has like 8 abs several months later. So that's awesome. How have you...
He always had 8 abs. It just came out.
That's true. He did. That's right.
Yeah.
Correct for you amount of daily caffeine. Typically, it's going to be under 250 milligrams. Now, that doesn't mean I'm always under 250 milligrams, but if I'm under 250 consumed before noon, I'm typically okay. And they're under 200 consumed before noon, I'm typically okay. Once I start getting into the 300 range or consume it afternoon, then there can be some sleep disruption effects of it. And so my main concern around caffeine is around sleep disruption. And so those are kind of the thresholds that I've personally found for a 180-pound body that has a pretty fast metabolism. It's going to be different for everybody, also dependent on what your caffeine tolerance is. But I sort of look at caffeine as something that's generally good, unless it's causing something else to be bad. And so if it's messing up your sleep, or if it's causing you anxiety, when you consume a certain amount or at a certain time, that's the amount you should not consume.
Yep. I agree with that. I don't drink coffee, so I have zero advice on this.
You're missing out.
Yeah, I've heard there's actually some positive health benefits. I just don't feel the need for it. Any tips on improving digestion in general? I have a weak stomach and want to consume better food, but I'm not able to. I'm not sure what exactly you mean by weak stomach, but I would say, usually, if your digestion is not good, it's probably because of the foods that you're eating. I would really check whether your foods have like things like vegetable oils and anything that doesn't really digest well for you in them. And so perhaps a way to test out what foods are causing this is doing an elimination diet, and figuring out what foods are causing it and then eliminating those from your diet. But yeah, I'm curious, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by weak stomach. Like I've heard a lot of Indians actually say this in the past, and I don't, yeah. Do you know, Alex?
Well, so yeah, I mean, if you're hearing it a lot from Indians, we know a lot of Indian food has seed oil. One thing that I've done to improve gut health is like probiotic inclusion. So, organic yogurt, as well as sauerkraut occasionally. Fermented foods, have been said to increase gut health. Now, I fortunately haven't had any like major gut issues, so I can't tell you, things were terrible, and then I had these 2 things and it was great.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that that's kind of like the generally recommended path that I've gone on myself.
Yeah, for me, when I was pseudo intellectual about my diet, and I was, I thought like I was eating healthy, but I wasn't. I used to consume things like a lot of cruciferous vegetables, so like broccoli and cauliflower and things like that. And I didn't realize how much they affected my gut health. I completely eliminated broccoli and cauliflower from my diet. And I feel so much better now. I don't have, like, it was almost excess fiber that was causing it. And I don't need those vegetables anymore. And so, like, I would just really figure out, like, what in your food is causing it, especially with, he said, North Indian diet, who had a bad diet for years, which led to this stage. I'm only 23. Yeah. Indian diets are horrific for gut health. I've had uncles that literally sit in the bathroom for like hours on end. And it's like, I'm not joking. Because like, it's just horrible. Like a lot of this stuff, it's not that the raw ingredients itself were bad. It's just that it's not that the cuisine is bad. It's just the ingredients that they're using these days are horrible. And so I would start from there, figure out like what curries are you eating that's causing that, and really just like completely start, like, take a very plain vanilla approach. So start by eating, like, it's unlikely that rice is causing this, right? So like start by eating like just rice and chicken. And then slowly add in like new things every day and figure out like, okay, if I add this new thing into my diet, it caused a gut issue. Maybe I shouldn't be eating that. For example, for me, if I eat broccoli, it causes gut issues, so I don't eat that anymore. So just keep adding new things in and figuring and testing it out. And this will take a few weeks for you to figure out, but that's the only way to figure out like what could be causing it.
Well, this has been awesome. I think we're way past time. I need to start my work day right now. Thanks everybody for joining. As Preethi mentioned, I think we'll probably end up doing something similar to this again, given how much we had to talk about. And then, we'll probably also end up doing something on supermarket fraud, as there's a lot of it and we can learn a lot about it.
Awesome. Cool, guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye, guys.